we've shifted so much to technology and so much to coddling people that when kids fail now, it's like the end of the world. It's like, I can't believe that I failed. I've never failed in my life because I've never done anything. And I think
Or
making,
they've gotten a participation ribbon for everything.
yeah, and like that's something, I'm very passionate about. Is because I want everybody to feel included. I want everybody to feel loved. But
You need to be in reality.
failure is so important. And if you don't let somebody fail, the older they get, they're eventually going to fail. And that failure is going to be catastrophic. So catastrophic. So I think to the younger generation, don't be honed in on one thing, be diverse, and just fail. Just be okay with failing as much as you can.
Welcome to the Global Affair podcast, brought to you by Love Out Loud, the world's largest love-based movement, actualizing a civilization of love by 2030. My name's Nicole Gibson, and join me and some of the world's brightest minds as we bring some of the most important and controversial conversations of our time into a space of unity. It's important to know that as your host, this isn't about my personal opinion or bias, but rather an opportunity to listen with love, honesty, curiosity, and reveal the true universal experience us humans have amongst the differences. So if you love the show, please let us know by giving us a rating and tell us how to make this conversation easier for other people to jump into as well. And with that, let's get it. Joe, welcome to the Global Affair.
I feel like we've done this before.
Well, there you go. It's because what we're about to talk on is extremely potent and needed, not because we tried to do this podcast once and the footage was lost in the process. But I think that there's a gift in that. You know, one of the themes I want to touch on today is sometimes you don't get it right the first time. And how do you deal with that? And I know one of the things you love to talk about is motivation, mental toughness, and resilience. And I think that that's such an important message in our world today for so many reasons. But before we get into that, why don't you just share a little bit about who you are, what you're passionate about, where you've come from? You're a New Yorker living in LA.
Yeah.
Who is Joe?
Yeah, well, before I get into that, being an optimist, I would say it's a good thing that we lost the footage for the first one because we only had a half an hour and I feel like we need more time to talk. So this is definitely a blessing in disguise. But
Joe Rogan style. That's our conversations.
There you go.
3 hours in.
But I am the founder and CEO of First Rounds on Me, and we're a dating app. And I think because we're a dating app, we get thrown into like a bucket when you first hear that. It's a very saturated market, but also the market is very stigmated. There's a big stigma to that market. So I think
Tinder's fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think who I am and the messaging that I'm trying to portray through the app and give the app is just a genuine sense of dating and a genuine sense of being a good person in life. And I think that's kind of where I started in New York, right? I lived in New York and I'm from New York. And when I got to the city, it was so fascinating to see all these people that were somewhat connected, somewhat not connected.
In New York?
Yeah. And then how dating got thrown into that. And my whole life, I was always a big connector, whether it was connecting friends or connecting people through business. I just loved seeing other people succeed because not because I introduced them, but just because there was a missing link for them and I helped that missing link. And I tried to just figure out, okay, what am I passionate about? I had a background in finance, I had a background in technology, but and they were potentially dream jobs that I got to, but when you're missing more, that gut in your feeling says you shouldn't be doing this in life. So dating in New York, I found this little gap in the market and I was like, I love connecting people. There's this gap in the market. I have a finance and technology background. Why don't I see how far I can go with this gap of people actually connecting in real life and giving dating apps a more genuine, take it kind of serious mentality. So that's kind of where I started and then moved out here. And out here, I've met amazing people like yourself. And it's going pretty well.
So one of the things that people often ask me when I talk about, in truth, being a technology that basically guides us back to ourselves ultimately as the technology is, why would you build a technology if your end goal is to not need the technology? And I'm curious to turn that back around on you. You saw this gap in dating that people needed to connect more in real life, actually have proper physical proximity, intimacy. Why tech?
Yeah, so I think that's the best question, right? And I think we're so similar in that sense. Like what you said, we're creating technology-based things with the opposite effect. Intention, yeah. And for me, I remember when I first started doing say like these interviews or press release things, I would say the world needs technology. Technology is amazing, right? The way that we can FaceTime and the way that we can use Facebook and talk to people all over the world, it's purely amazing. But I think there's things that technology will never be able to solve. And one thing is that human connection when it comes to potentially trying to find a partner in life, right? So for me, and I use this comparison, and it might not be a good one because I've gotten mixed reactions from it. But essentially,
Try us.
yeah, I'm going to try you. And you give me your honest opinion. Like when a mother has a child, technology can never, in my opinion, replicate that special bond and how that inhuman connection between those two people, which is, in my opinion, is the greatest connection that humanity has, is when a mother gives birth to a child, and them sticking together for those first 2 years and how they're so dependent on building that connection. Technology wouldn't be able to replicate that. Imagine you had a baby and then you put it into this technology machine.
Have you seen them? The artificial wombs?
No.
Yeah, they're being developed.
Oh no. See,
yeah.
I strongly
I have
disagree
mixed feelings
with that.
about this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd love to hear
People
that.
are trying to go there is the point, you know? So there's this dualistic perspective, which is, well, if technology becomes so real, if we can live, say, in a simulation that we can't even tell the difference anymore between reality and what technology can build, why does it matter so much?
But then what's the point of being a human being?
Yeah, this is definitely my perspective, and I would say a lot of the listeners of this podcast share that sentiment. But I think it's an important question to sort of deeply explore and not kind of let our kind of knee-jerk reaction of like, oh no, that could never be, kind of get in the way of actually more intimately exploring that concept.
Yeah, and maybe I want to reject it because I don't want to see a world that way, which that's my opinion. And
as a visionary,
if it goes that way of technology doing everything for us, then I guess I can't control that. But I think the imperfections and the small intricacies of every single person you speak to make life so beautiful. And if a machine told me, okay, your favorite song is this, just listen to this all day. This is the person you should be best friends with. Just be best friends with them.
Based on the algorithm.
Yeah. And literally every decision you made was just already calculated for you. Again, maybe that's good, but then we're just not humans, essentially.
And that's it. This is why I love this question, because it really forces people to ask the question, what does it mean to be human? And I really think that this is a very important question during our time. What is it to be human? And you just shared, the imperfection. And I think in dating, that's so often underestimated when you meet someone and they have quirks and mannerisms and things that really just can't be conveyed in the picture perfect world that can be, digital identities. That's actually the thing that forms a closeness and that we ultimately fall in love with, I think.
Yeah. So someone said this to me the other day, and I never thought about life or sports this way, but they said, why do we love sports? Why do we love championship games? We love them so much because there's that percent chance that they might screw up. And if they're so good at their craft and they don't screw up, it's so fascinating. But if they do screw up, they're screwing up in front of the whole world, and we're on the edge of our seats to see just how good they are. But if that didn't exist and it was just a purely technology-based world, we would put the game into a simulator and they'd be like, okay, that's the score. We would not watch it. We would not care. But we care so much. Same thing with dating, is because you don't know what could happen. And just like, that's why I love when people date and put themselves out there, because you're putting yourself on the edge of your seat to see what could potentially happen. And greatness could happen, or you could fuck up miserably. But if you fuck up miserably, that's not bad either, because you could hopefully learn why you fucked up, learn what you like, learn what you don't like, and just progress as a human. And I think sports, dating, what you're doing, those edge of your seat imperfections are what make you feel. Again, like, what is a robot going to tell you how to actually feel? Maybe, but what's the point?
Yeah. And, I've heard you talk before around dating that there are so many people that kind of in the dating game, they're putting the pressure on every single date to basically find the person that they're going to marry, and they're not really being on the journey that could otherwise be. Like, maybe they're not the one, but it's still a great experience. And I think this is an amazing mindset to adopt generally in life, like eliminating the expectation, showing up, willing to be fully present and engaged. And like, tell me about that. Was that always ingrained in your personality? Was that always how you approached dating? And I'm assuming in a way it's how you approach entrepreneurship.
I was just always fascinated with people. So from a young age, and I don't know why I thought this, I don't know if this is a good way to think, a bad way to think. I was playing football and I had to be like 8 years old. And I noticed that most of the kids were white and there was a few black kids on my team and they were like kind of treated differently, not maliciously, but I don't know why I picked up on it. And then I thought about this deeper and I could also be just conceited in thinking this way, but I was like, why am I friends with all the quote unquote cool kids in school? And why do all the girls in school like me? Like, why did I get lucky in that way? And I don't know why I thought this way. And then I started to like ask my parents deep questions about, we had this kid, Tyshawn, who's a great football player. And I'd be like, Mom, I want to hang out with Tyshawn after.
Shout out to Tyshawn.
After football. And she would give me a different reaction than if it was like a white kid, right? And I was like, why? Because he was a great kid. But because we were a little bit different, I was like, oh, there's a little bit of hesitation there from my mom. And I don't think she was trying to be malicious, but it was just maybe uncharted territory for her. So I was like, why are people so different? And why do we think so differently? And then as I got older, I was just so fascinated to connect with everybody I can. I was like, I want to know how they operate. I want to know how they operate. And that spiraled into my adult life. And so what I do on my podcast is try and talk about one specific dating trend per week to kind of quote unquote sound like an expert. But it's funny, trends. You just touched on the one I'm talking about this week. And I don't know if you had listened to something, but nothing's out yet. And it is the pressure we put on first dates. And the study that I read said most people go into a first date doing one of two things. They either undershare or overshare, right? Which, if you think about it,
in most interactions, probably ever.
Yeah. And this article in particular was breaking it down, saying if you undershare on a first date, you are creating a lot of anxiety because you're purposely not being yourself, and you're trying to internalize, just be there, and it's probably going to be an awkward encounter because you're just overthinking not to undershare. And overshare. And then
maybe driven by an anxiety of oversharing.
If you overshare, you put too much pressure on the first date because you go into it thinking, this is going to be my husband, this is going to be my wife. And you start to ask really deep questions that most people don't want to hear on a first date, right? Like, I particularly like to get deep on a first date, but I would never be like, hey, Nicole, do you want to have kids? Yes or no? Tell me right now. And then that date.
Have you ever asked that question on a first date?
No, never. I mean, I've gotten it asked before and it's a little uncomfortable. I understand why it's asked, but why put unnecessary pressure on a first date? Or why not try and be the most like yourself on a first date? But that there's a fine line. And I think being in the middle is where people should try and live and trying to learn to live, where it's just go into it like you're friends with that person. You know, obviously you're attracted to each other, you're on a date, and just get to know them as a person and then see what happens. So the pressure we put on first dates is definitely a real thing from what I've read and experienced.
And what was it, before we move on to discussing the parallels between dating and entrepreneurship, what was it about the way you experienced dating in New York that really made you feel like there was the gap there? Like, what were the real life experiences, the real life dates, how Joe was feeling like living in the middle of New York City that gave you the motivation to want to work in dating?
Yeah, so when I first got to New York City, I was 26 and I wasn't on any dating app. So this was 2016. And I would just go out a lot with my friends, and if I saw somebody in the bar, I'd try and approach them and, you know, see if there was a connection or try and buy them a drink. And I noticed that, I don't know, I was getting pushback, and I don't know if it was because they just didn't like me or what, but it was different pushback because before I moved to New York, my whole early 20s, that's what I would do. And sometimes it would work, sometimes you get rejected, and that was life. But I noticed there was just a weird shift into the reaction by women when I would approach them in the bar. And
like they weren't used to it.
Exactly. Well, I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
And then as I talked to more friends and more women, they were like, women feel more comfortable now to meet on a dating app. And I said, well, really? That's fascinating to me, because at that time, dating apps still had a little stigma where when
did was Tinder really the first to ever
No,
kind of...
so Match was.
Okay.
Match started in the 90s. So it was the first quote unquote online dating.
But it was like mostly for older people,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Tinder was the first app. But yeah, when Tinder came out, it was for people who needed Tinder, for people who couldn't meet somebody in real life or had a challenge. So it was an easy way for them to
I remember the stigma.
Yeah, it was an easy way for people to not get rejected in front of everybody in real life. And it was great, but it was it was also bad because that's where the world just went so fast without understanding the dating app world. So for me, I asked my friends that were female, asked my friends that were male, and I went on these dating apps, and I was like, I guess this is the normal thing to do now, so let me do it. And this was around 2016 when I think dating apps became normalized. So going on it, immediately I was excited but overwhelmed. There was so many options. So you just sit there and you really do swipe randomly because not out of malice, but because there are so many options. And then you get your few hits and then you start to navigate through the hits and see, okay, who do I want to strike a conversation with? But this all happens so quickly and so often that you then have all these conversations. And this isn't one day, 1 week, and you're just like, shit, I'm talking to 5, 10, 15 people. I don't even know what I'm saying. So from there,
Can't keep up with the interest.
and you forget. You have to like go back in the group and the chat, like scroll up and be like, okay, I don't want to ask that same question again, because you get caught out doing that. And then through those conversations, you'd find, because you'd want to go on a date. I always wanted to go on a date. So say I went on 2 dates a week, I would find 2 people and try and strike a date with them. On that date, it would go one of 2 ways. One would be we had already asked each other a lot of questions. So it was weird to not have natural icebreaking questions when you meet somebody, where, what do you do? Where are you from? Tell me about yourself. It creates an easy flowing conversation, which is great. If you do that through the computer or through the phone, when you meet them, you say, oh.
It's still a stranger, but you've kind of
you say, oh, I know your mom had hip surgery yesterday. How was it? It's like, oh, that's right. You know about my mom's hip surgery, but I never even met you in person. Sure, let's talk about that. So it's weird. And the other thing was, no matter how good the person's profile was or how interesting they were through the chat, I always built them up to be better than who they were, which is a bad thing. And
in your head, on the app.
Yeah, they could be
every single time.
Yeah, they could be a very beautiful person, very funny, say all the right things, and I would just make it times 10 in my head of, okay, they're going to be the smartest, most genuine, kindest, best looking person in the world.
Why? Why do you think we do that in a digital context?
I think, again, we put pressure and we're also insecure and we want the best. What's the best? We just want the best, right? I don't know why. Well, what's the best in a partner? What's the best in dating? Who knows? But
so it's the hope.
The hope that this is the best thing ever. And when you get on that date, that person could be great. They could have not lied. They could have been the way they look in their pictures. They could be just as nice, just as funny.
Not a catfish.
And you're let down because you were hoping for something that was unrealistic. So going on these dates, I was like, okay, I get that people are going to gravitate towards technology. It's just the way the world's going. And it is great if you use dating apps the right way. You're going to meet people that you would never meet. But that interaction is so non-organic and disingenuous that there's no genuine approach to this. And I think if someone, and I'm not saying I'm that person, but if someone could find this gap and combine those two real life experiences with technology, I'm interested to see how that would go. And then that's when the idea started, and I went down the path of seeing if it was possible or not, and now I'm here.
Interesting. And what would you say, I have a lot of questions about your journey into building First Rounds on Me, but let's talk about the type of user you're trying to capture. Like, what is the unique persona quality about someone that's going to choose First Rounds on Me over the other options in the market?
Yeah, so we always get the question of what's your demographic? And I think when people ask that question, they expect an age range. I don't know why.
Psychographic.
That's what I tell them is that there is no age, because dating apps are so normalized for all ages. It doesn't matter if you're 50, if you're 20.
And do you have that range?
Yeah, you can go from 18 to whatever.
In actual users?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I doubt there's anyone in their 70s, but
I'd be impressed.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to look.
Finding love.
But what was the question?
The psychographic.
Oh, yeah. So it's I built it for me, right? And who am I? I'm someone who...
This is why I'm asking the question.
I'm someone who has confidence enough to just go meet you and put myself out there. And I'm open and okay with being rejected. But I know that I want to give everybody a chance. And also I'm busy, right? I had a job in finance. I had a job in technology. I don't want to be texting all day, and I don't want to be out at a bar every night, right? So how can I come up with a way that there's an app for people who have the mindset of, I'm busy, I have a lot of stuff going on in life, which is great, but my end goal is to connect with another human being. And I'm not saying that this app is for people that should get married or fall in love, but it's for people who genuinely just want to have a beer, a coffee, a juice with another human being and be open and be confident enough to seeing what could happen. So I would say if I had to really hone in on the perfect person, say it was a woman in New York City, has a great marketing job she's a lawyer and she works crazy hours. She makes good money, but she doesn't have time to put into a dating app because she doesn't want to just randomly talk to all these people. She wants to carve enough time in her week to sit down with another human being. Both of them are confident enough to put themselves out there at a bar or coffee shop and just kind of see what happens. And I think that is what I'm looking for and what I'm trying to build. And maybe those people don't exist as much as I would like, but maybe I could help push them to think that way. Where it's just be okay with being rejected, be okay with your insecurities, be okay just feeling uncomfortable on a first date. Just it's okay. Where we've all been there. It's not going to be perfect.
Experience life.
And people always say, what if you get stood up at the bar? I said that could be the best night in the world. If you went to a bar to meet someone for a date, they stood you up, you could sit at that bar, you're going to talk to 10, 15 people if you want, and you have no idea who you're going to strike up a conversation with. It could be your next business partner. So it's a mindset. If you take advantage to be genuine and be righteous in every decision you make, meeting other people, being rejected at the bar could be the best thing that ever happened to you.
I love it. So what about love? You know, you're saying that your intent was really you wanted to have the experience of being able to go on first dates with people. You're a busy guy living in New York. There's got to be a part of you that deep down somewhere there was some romanticism, a love, a love of the idea of love, or was it really not driven by that? And did that develop as you started to work on something that really is, in a lot of ways, you know, facilitating people's, I think, deep desire to connect, to fall in love?
Yeah, so I was always a hopeless romantic, always.
Okay, let's get into this.
Yeah, I think my mom was telling Hannah a story when we were back in New York of how I was 5 years old and she was picking me up from kindergarten and this little girl comes up to my mom and goes, Joseph's my boyfriend. And I was like, yeah, Mom, this is my girlfriend. And she said, from 5 years old until you were an adult, you loved love. But I always wanted to treat women right. And I didn't always get into a relationship because I did like being single, right? I knew, okay, I'm in my 20s. I'm living in New York. I want to find a love story that's different. I don't want it to be your high school sweetheart and you knew each other your whole lives. There's nothing different about the person I'm going to meet. So I always knew I was a hopeless romantic, but I always knew I was going to wait until that person was unique. And also, I always knew that I liked the idea of my app, but until it happens, you don't know if this is a good idea. This could be a shitty idea. People might not want to meet this way. And it all came together when I actually met Hannah. I met Hannah on Hinge so this was in November of 2020. So we had just started the app we were like 4 months in. So I knew how the app was working and we were building it, but I was still using Hinge because I really liked dating apps. So I saw her, and every time I met a woman on a dating app, I would tell them, like, listen, I have this way about me where I just want to meet you right away, knowing that I was making the app. So I wanted to see if it worked. Reaction. So most women who I met before Hannah were open to that as well. They're like, let's go on a date. And I loved it. I got to meet so many people. And I also got to learn what I liked and didn't like. But also the few dates I went on before Hannah, those women kind of elevated me. I learned so many things from some of those dates. And I think maybe I needed to go on those dates for a reason. And that's kind of what I want to tell people with Restaurants on Me is, like you said, don't put pressure because you could learn something from these dates. But after those dates, Hannah and I had matched on the app and I said, listen, I think you're very beautiful. I think you're interesting. I really don't want to waste too much time on this app because the more time we waste, we're probably never going to meet up in real life. And I was nervous because not only did I want to meet her, but I was like, this could really be a perfect use case for the app. And it sounds
the most important thing.
It sounds bad, but at that time I didn't know Hannah, right? I didn't know if I was going to fall in love with her. So I was like,
what was your first impression?
On the app or in person?
Both.
On the app.
Hannah is Joe's wife, by the way.
On the app, she had a really good profile, but you could tell she was a model, right? So I had a hesitation where, okay, maybe she's catfish, but or maybe I had the wrong understanding of models as well. So I was like, maybe she's not really interesting. She's a model. But she looked so interesting on top of being a model, answering her prompts and the pictures she was in. Some of them were goofy. They weren't all curated. So I was excited. And also the I don't know what side it is, going out with a model,
Sure.
it's your ego, right? So I'm going to go out with a model. It doesn't matter. But so I said that to her and she said, okay, like I'm free tonight, which was a Sunday, or Wednesday. And I said, okay, let's go out tonight at 8:00. And she was like, really? I said, yeah, I'll see you at 8:00 tonight. And she said, okay, I'm a vegan. She was a vegan at the time. She said, I'm a vegan, so let's not pick anywhere that's not a vegan restaurant. So I said, okay, perfect. I Googled vegan restaurants near me. I said, okay, I'll meet you here at 8:00 tonight. And she said, all right, I'll see you there. So I was like, wow, this is going the way First Rounds on Me goes. And we didn't really say anything else other than that. So I was so excited about the anticipation to get to know her. I didn't know anything about her other than what was filled out in her profile and the fact that she was open to meeting in real life, which was such a big turn on for me. So I had pulled up to the restaurant. She was there early. And my first reaction was, shit, she's tall. Because she's about my height. And I think she was wearing some platforms. So she was taller than me that night. And I was like, oof, okay. So I hugged her and she gave me this really warm feeling. And I knew she was a good person, which was a huge green flag for me, just knowing, okay, no matter what happens tonight, she's a good person. So I'm just excited to be on this date with her. And we hugged, said hi and nice to meet you. We asked for our table. And that time in asking for the table to getting to the table is awkward because you don't know each other. You're together, but you're walking to the table.
10 seconds.
So you don't know what to say. It's like, how's your drive down? It's good. How's yours? Oh, it's good. And then you get to the table and like, that's when like the floodgates opened. I just had so many questions. And with each question, she got more and more fascinating with her answers, but also she was so much more fascinated with me. So it was beautiful where I was so fascinated with her asking her all these questions. She was so fascinated with me asking me all these questions. And conversation flowed and flowed. And our waiter came over multiple times just saying, do you guys want to order food? And we were like, shit, we didn't even look at the menu. Just give us a second. And he said, guys, I came over here 3 times. You didn't look at the menu. Just please look at the menu now and order something. And we were like, all right, let's shut up for 2 minutes and just look. And it was really cool. And after that, obviously in relationships, you go through your troubles and, whatever. But after that, I knew, wow, I really connected with someone and I'm falling in love with someone immediately. And it showed that what I'm trying to do with the app is going to work because I didn't go into it using Hannah as a use case, but I was hopeful that this could actually work. And I think the fact that it did makes me feel good, not only because I was able to find a partner, but because what I'm trying to do, I know works from experience. Yeah.
So just share with the listeners, because we haven't touched on it yet, the actual utility of First Rounds on Me.
Yeah. So people always ask how First Rounds on Me is different because there's, I think, 1,600 dating apps. I don't know if it's in the US or in the world. So there's a lot of dating apps and most of them function the same way. A lot of them say they're different, but they mostly function the same way. You swipe, you connect, and you chat, and then hopefully you meet. But I think the differences with most of the other dating apps are that they're specific to a group of people, right? You have apps that are sex specific, apps that are hookup specific, apps that are Black, apps that are Jewish. So the differences in the apps are more for the groups than for the utility.
The niches.
The niches, yeah. So, and the niches are coming out more, which is great. And I think a lot more apps are trying to go through this in-person style, which is great. But with ours, we hone in on 3 different differentiators. So the first is a lot of dates get halted because there's no plan. And usually one person gets turned off or they don't even want to put that extra effort in to come up with an idea. And what we do is when you see someone you like, instead of just liking them and then starting that conversation, we take that step first. We take a prior step into the like, is where if you come across someone's profile, you'll click a button and then you could set up an actual date. So you pick a drink and we have coffee, juice, cocktail, tea.
Is it always drinks?
Yeah. So I'll get into that if you want. Okay. But you pick a drink, then you'll pick a time, and then through Google Maps and through partners, you'll pick a place. So you'll curate this date and then you'll send that to somebody as the first point of contact. So before ever connecting, they get an alert saying, Joe wants to buy you a beer at Soho House Friday at 8:00. And it's nice because someone's coming to you with a plan. And then from there, it's like, okay, let me look at their profile and see if I'm even interested in this person. Then you click on that person's profile. And then if you are attracted or interested in that person, you could accept the date or you could reschedule the date if it doesn't work for your schedule. And then once you accept that date, it takes all the pressure of everything. It's like, okay, we have a plan in place. We're attracted to each other. We're excited to see what happens. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is on all these dating apps, there's the endless options, right? And that's where we're not trained as human beings to use dating apps because do you watch How I Met Your Mother?
Yeah, sometimes.
So I watched an episode the other day and Barney has this phone and he goes on all these dates with these really beautiful women, but he never wants to kiss them or finish the date because he's like, what's next? And his phone will ring and he'll just go on the next date and he'll go on the next date. And he's like, I can't control myself because no matter how good the person is I'm with, I just want to go on the next one to see what's out there. And that's our mindset with these current dating apps is there's so many options that all the options could be great, but because we're so excited to see the next round of options, our brains aren't geared to use apps properly. So with our app, once you have a confirmed date, you can only have one confirmed date per day. And the reason we do this is because we want you to put all your...
put a limit on it. Nice.
We want you to put all your time and energy into one person at a time because...
7 a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people will do 7 a week. But yeah, we hope that just you putting effort into one person, going to meet them, will take so much stress and anxiety off of you just endlessly swiping for that next best option. And it creates what we spoke about earlier, the whole human element of it. So I think that's differentiator number 2. And then number 3 is what we also spoke about is you can only chat with your date 12 hours before the date starts. So essentially it's like a full day, right? If your date's at 8 o'clock at night, your chat box opens at 8 o'clock in the morning. And we do this because obviously we want to give the users time to feel each other out and feel somewhat safe and like make sure the responses are normal. But like what happened with me and Hannah, and like what we see from my experience dating in New York City, you could either ask so many questions that it makes the encounter, not organic, or you can become pen pals, or you could just find a reason to be like, you know what, I've been talking to you for a couple of days. You're just boring. When they might actually not be boring. They just don't want to text all day. So that 12-hour gap, the 12-hour period, you could just say a few words to each other, make sure the responses are normal, but
know that you have a plan in place.
Yeah. And then say, hey, I'm excited to see you in 2-3 hours. Let me know if you're running late. Oh, I had a crazy day. I'll see you in a little bit. And then when you get to that first date, you know that that person's full focus is on you for the day. You know that this is going to be an organic encounter because we don't know anything about each other and we have a plan in place. And again, no dating app's perfect. No dating app's going to solve everyone's issues. But I think what I'm trying to do with the human element of dating and the human biology and psychology is give those 3 tools to just have a better baseline and starting point for a first date.
Fascinating. And by the way, download it if this is a plug for First Rounds on Me, the entire team. Well done. I think it's a brilliant product that is such an important differentiator. So the burning question I have is, what are the top things this whole journey of love and dating and presence with people and understanding the importance of not trying to kind of overwhelm yourself with overstimulation, all of these things that we've touched on, how have you applied that to your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So like we spoke about earlier, the greatest part of this past year was the people I met on the journey, right? Because it's been a tough year. It's exciting, right? I got money to start my own company. It's amazing, but there's so many challenges. And the fact that I was always fascinated with people and I wanted to connect with people, and I also wanted to keep the right people around me. And when I say right people, that doesn't mean people who have money or people that could help me. It's people that care about me. And over this past year, I met people like you. I met so many other founders, so many other people doing things to help humans. And just being associated with them has made this past year, you couldn't even put a price tag on it. And I spoke to you earlier this week because I was dealing with a challenge. And having people like you who genuinely care about not only me, but other people, where I could ask you a question and you don't give me a flippant answer or you don't ignore it. You actually, in that we might have texted for an hour, just giving me genuine advice. And on top of that, you actually were like, why don't we just work together? And I was like, wow, this is so cool, because not only does she care about the challenge that I'm in, but she believes in me as a person, that she's open to even working with me. And if I needed a job, she could give me a job. And I don't know if that really answers your question.
I think there's themes that are important to kind of break down there, because I hear them in everything that you're sharing, and it's such an important thing to understand. Something that I think is so missing often in the mindset of founders and entrepreneurs in, highly competitive environments is this quality. of care. You're referring to it as care. I also hear presence, presence with each other and what that actually can contribute to finding meaningful solutions in the journey of entrepreneurship, which is full of challenges and full of problems that you need to solve. How often can we lighten the burden if we actually had true, real relationships around us?
Yeah. So, and that's what makes me so excited, is to know that there are these founders out there that believe this way. I was on the call today with a founder. He has this great company. It's a fashion company, but the reason that we're working together and the reason I like him is because he's like you. We're actually there to help each other. And I was on the phone with him today, and he said something to me just point blank. He said, I really don't understand you. And I was like, oh, where's this going? He said, I've never met a founder who genuinely just likes connecting people to other people to help them and not themselves. And he said, he asked me, he said, why do you do that? And I said, I don't know. I never really thought about it, but I guess I do it because I want to see other people succeed. But I also know that I'll probably run into an issue, because this past year I've realized I don't even know 20% of the answers. And I'm nowhere near the smartest person in a room, the world. I'm going to need help from people, and I actually want their help. So if I could be proactive in giving other people help and they see that I'm a good person, hopefully when I need help from them, they're right there to be like, hey, we know you are out there to help us. We're here to help you. And I think spreading that word and spreading that vibe, really just makes me happy in life. And it happened again today. Do you know We Are Eight?
No.
Oh, all right, I have to tell you about We Are Eight. So We Are Eight's essentially a new Instagram, but we'll talk about that.
Oh, you were telling me about it last time we were in
So I met the CEO, and then I met
She's
the
a
founder.
Soho member, right?
The founder is, the CEO was just there. I met the founder, and we were on the elevator up in Soho, going up the elevator, and she had the We Are Eight hat on. And I said, oh, isn't that We Are Eight?
Joe.
And she said, yeah, how do you know about We Are Eight? And I said, oh, I met the CEO. So I don't know how. She's like, oh, sit down and tell me about what you do. And I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. She's the founder of this. They just raised $100 million. Like, why does she care about me? So we sat down, and she's like, oh, I'm working on this new art project. It's called Fractioning. And she was telling me about fractioning, and I was telling her about Fresh Runs on Me. And I'm in the process of hiring an advisory board. And I was like, oh, I think you'd be perfect for my advisory board. And I was like, my friend, he's a really great artist. I want to introduce you guys. And today I introduced them, and same thing. They were both just like, why did you introduce us? I said, I don't know. You guys are working on a similar project, and I think you're both great people. Who knows what you guys can create together? And it just made me so happy. Like, that's it. So these are the things I'm learning about being a founder and a CEO, is that you don't have to be a dick. You don't have to treat people the wrong way. I think the way the world's going now is if you do the opposite, you're going to be way more successful, especially as your image gets out there. You want the world to see you as a good person. Of course, not everybody's going to align with you. Not everybody's going to like you. But the more you're genuinely a good person, the harder it is to take you down.
What do you feel like are the key things that our generation, as the millennial generation, want to say, want to hear, but are too afraid to?
I think the new generation...
Well, we're kind of like, there's a generation under us now. So we're sort of this, and this is why it fascinates me. We're the generation that's so close to inheriting power.
I think that the generation, each generation after us, even with our generation, the generations before us, we're becoming so specialized that we think just because we know one thing so much that we're the smartest person ever. But as you get into the real world, you realize you need to know so many different diverse things that other people are going to know and that you're going to need help. I think that's one thing, is not being so closed-minded with whatever that one thing is, because, hundreds of years ago, humans knew so many different things. They knew how to knit. They knew how to hunt. They knew how to do everything. And now, we're evolving as humans. Our brains are getting smarter, but we're getting smarter and specialized. But we're getting specialized. And I think that's not a good thing. And I would say to the generations after us, it's like, maybe don't be specialized in one thing. Be as diverse as you can. But also, even when I was a kid, I would go out and like scrape my knee, fall off my bike, and learn to fail as a kid, and really learn how to fail. Like, just make a fool out of myself out in public, because we were just kids, just being out there and being real. Now we've shifted so much to technology and so much to coddling people that when kids fail now, it's like the end of the world. It's like, I can't believe that I failed. I've never failed in my life because I've never done anything. And I think
they've gotten a participation ribbon for everything.
Yeah, and like that's something, I'm very passionate about. Is because I want everybody to feel included. I want everybody to feel loved. But
you need to be in reality.
Failure is so important, and if you don't let somebody fail. The older they get, they're eventually going to fail. And that failure is going to be catastrophic. So catastrophic. So I think to the younger generation, don't be honed in on one thing, be diverse, and just fail. Just be okay with failing as much as you can.
Yeah, I hear this, second really important theme, the parallels between dating and entrepreneurship, expectation versus reality, how to manage our expectations and actually be grounded in reality. I've often wondered how many businesses actually could have survived difficult times that maybe were the thing that put them on the path to bankruptcy, or there was a conflict, an explosion of the business of some kind, implosion. Was that the founder or the founding team or the investors had these expectations that weren't ultimately reached when they believed they should have been reached, and it puts you in a closed state. You're no longer looking for solutions. You're no longer kind of embracing reality and being open and looking for what other opportunities actually might be there to solve problems. And I really believe this. Like entrepreneurs, I think one of the most important skills we can have is agility, to be nimble and agile and flexible and stay open. So I think it's really cool that in a way dating kind of catalyzed that for you, taught you that.
Yeah, and I think being agile is perfect, because one word I use with my team and in dating is pivoting, right? Like one day you could be looking for...
Startup's favorite word.
Is it? Oh, see, I guess subconsciously just inherited that.
Not really. I think it's a dreaded word amongst startup teams. Another pivot.
Well, see, I think
daily reality.
I think pivoting is so important because your initial idea is probably not going to be your idea. And if you stick to that idea, you're going to implode the business pretty quickly. And being agile and nimble and pivoting is you adapting to your idea with what's needed and what's wanted. So I think that's important. And then also in the dating world, pivoting what you want, pivoting what you see is so important, because one day you could say, I want to be single. The next day you could say, I want to be in a relationship. And your ability to pivot in a genuine, righteous way helps with communication. It helps with how you put yourself out there, and also pivoting and getting rejected. Getting rejected, I think, is the most fascinating thing if you handle it the right way.
Why do we hate it so much?
I don't know. And I think if you get rejected and you sit for 2 days and be like, why did I get rejected? From that person's standpoint, but also from my own standpoint, that self-growth, it's just so valuable.
What have you learned in that? Give us some examples of times that you've done that and what it's supported you to learn.
So earlier when I said I went on the 4 dates or 5 dates before I met Hannah, it was a tough time for the world, right? It was the middle of the pandemic. Everybody had very strong opinions. And I was just on these dates, getting to know people the way I did. And I started to realize I'm not right. Everything I say is not right. Why do I always think I'm right? Why am I not being more open to people's ideas? Why am I not taking accountability for my mistakes? And I got to know women's emotions better and women's EQs better. And I just saw like, okay, there's so many different ways to just be genuine with someone. You can communicate in so many genuine ways. And just because I met you and it's only been a week, I don't have to ghost you. I don't have to be a dick. I don't have to say, hey, you asked me this question that really bothered me, fuck you. It's just, why not just treat them with full communication and full righteousness? And I learned all that through self-growth, and also like the expectation of no one raining on my parade, right? Where it's, if you're different than me in any way or you're causing me any stress, you're not the person for me. When that's so far from the truth, because you're never going to meet somebody who doesn't cause you any issues, doesn't cause you any stress, doesn't meet your expectations physically all the time. So the more you could say, well, what do you actually value? Like, look in the mirror. What do you actually value? And if you're valuing all these things, are you giving those things to the person on the other side?
Are you in integrity?
Yeah. And I was looking in the mirror and I said, oh, I want this person to treat me this way. I want this person to quote unquote look this way. But what do they see in me? Maybe most guys are like, oh, I want this supermodel of a girlfriend or a wife, and then they don't work out. So what expectation is that? Or they want someone to cook for them, clean for them, be nice, love them, but they're just a dick to that person. Why would that person want to be with you? So
do you think that's been exacerbated in this generation?
What?
The level of expectation.
I think that we have access to so much technology and we have access to so much information that it makes our expectations so unrealistic. And I hate to say unrealistic because I'm obviously an entrepreneur like you, where I think everything's realistic. I believe
That's right.
we could change the world.
It's hard.
But-
It's hard to know fantasy.
But I think we see the fakest, most unrealistic version of people on Instagram, and then we judge that with our own lives. And then we have this super high expectation of, oh, so-and-so is traveling here. So-and-so has this job. So-and-so is dating this person. That's what I want. When that's literally the best of that person. And it's unrealistic. And I think we definitely live in a world like that right now.
And so what about someone listening that's maybe living that life, but the conversation we're having right now is something that's really confronting? The invitation to lower their expectations, get more honest with themselves, be open to situations and people that maybe they haven't been previously, and it brings up, I don't know, this fear, this defensive-ness. How can they start taking the first step?
So I think one thing, and it's the easiest thing, is talk to as many people as you can. Because if you talk to 10 people that you never met in your life, and you open up to them about how you feel in life and all the things that you go through, I guarantee you at least 3 or 4 of them are going to be going through the same exact thing that you are. And the more people you meet and the more people you connect with and the more people you share your story with, the more you find out that it's a common thing. Everybody thinks that whatever issue they're dealing with, they're the only one dealing with that issue, and they don't want to tell anybody because they'll feel vulnerable and they'll feel weak. But it's quite the contrary. Everybody's in the same boat, whether it's a medical condition, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's
we're all going
insecurity. If you open up with that person, you're going to feel at home because you have someone to talk about this with, but also you're going to get probably different advice than the way you think about that same issue. And I think the more advice we get from people who are in that same boat help us. So I think that's what I would do, is just meet as many people as you can, and not just the wrong people. Meet the people that you feel like you could eventually open up to, because if the whole world communicated with each other on a very passionate, vulnerable, deep understanding level, there would be 0 issues in this world.
Yeah.
Like literally 0 issues.
Well, the way we relate to those issues would probably be the different thing. It's like I was having this conversation yesterday. We can't, no matter how self-aware we become, we can't escape the human condition. And I think that's a really important thing to understand. But the way that we relate to the human condition, the way we hold it with compassion and empathy versus, violence and volatility, can really transform, our personal world, the people around us, and then, definitely the world.
Yeah, and if you look at the news, politics, different countries, we hate each other because we only hear, again, the worst of each other. If you got 2 people to sit down that had very, very differing opinions on something that was a very serious topic, and they both went into it talking with openness and talking with a level of, let's not escalate this. At the end of that conversation, they might not fully agree, but understanding each other, they would probably come out of that saying, wow, I actually don't hate you, and I kind of understand where you're coming from. Maybe there is a clear path to a solution between us.
Yeah, or peace.
Yeah.
I always find it fascinating doing a lot of the work I do when you have people on 2 opposite sides of a conversation. Actually, what they're being driven from is usually the same thing, but they just have a completely different way of looking at it. So they're both wanting to feel safe. They both are fighting for what they believe is right. And when you strip it back to the values of that human being, actually, they're not so different. The belief structures are different. But I think, collectively, yes, there's difference, but I would say collectively as human beings, we do tend to deep down value really similar things.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny you say that. So Russell Brand, I don't know if this is like a super viral click or not, but he was on CNN and they were talking about something political, and they were like shitting on Fox News. And at the end, or Russell Brand was telling the group why the media was so bad because they make us hate each other. And then all these CNN panelists were like, yeah, exactly. And then he stopped and he said, what do you mean exactly? And they said, no, we agree with you, Russell. And he said, no. Just because they're the problem doesn't mean that you're the solution. You're equally the problem. You just think the complete opposite way, but you both shout out the same things to your crowds about the other. And they were so stunned because, Russell Brand's a liberal person, and I'm sure he aligns
intense
with the CNN views more. But they were so shocked that, oh, you're calling us out too, because even though we disagree with them, we do the same exact thing that they do.
We're still against them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was so fascinating to see that.
Being for something instead of against something, I think, again, is a really underestimated superpower in entrepreneurship. Like often you go into a business and a problem you're trying to solve, and people want to always push the entrepreneur to think about, okay, well, who are your competitors? Who are you going against? How are you kind of going to differentiate yourself from them, rather than embracing kind of an and not or mentality? Well, what else can I contribute, rather than, I don't necessarily need all of my quote unquote competitors to die in order to be successful. And for me, this comes back to kind of a fundamental view that we've been taught from a very young age. I remember the first time I really became awake to this was I think I was in grade 5, and we had a maths exam after lunch, and I asked my friend, can you help me with some things that I need to understand for the maths exam? And she said to me, no, because if I help you do better, I'll do worse. And I just remember from that moment on being like, how does that make sense? Because you're going to help me do better. You're going to do the same, if not better, because you've actually reinforced what you know through teaching me. All you're doing by that is helping me do a little bit better. And yet that is a mindset that is so reflected in so many different aspects of life, and such a difficult thing, I think, to uncondition. And then when you look at that at a global level, a global context, like even I spend a lot of time talking about artificial intelligence, researching artificial intelligence. It's obviously a kind of a niche subject matter that I'm really interested in because of what we're building, the ethical considerations of merging emotion with AI, these sorts of things. But you've kind of got, in a way, like an industrial complex that's driving the race for artificial intelligence at any cost. And this is kind of like this very complex of the human condition amplified times a billion, because the implication of the competitiveness is potentially, and it's not that I believe this is going to happen, it's not that I want this to happen, but potentially it could have dire outcomes because there's just so much unknown, we don't know. But none of the players are willing to take a step back and actually trust that the other players are going to do the right thing. So then the only alternative is to continue to spearhead forward at any cost. And I really just think that that's such a fascinating example of ultimately human ignorance and just an unwillingness to trust in each other and believe that we can come up with, a solution that's really going to benefit everyone.
Yeah. So it's so funny how so aligned we are for the most part. But I remember even now, we get so many comments from other startup dating apps or other platforms and say, don't download First Rounds on me, download this app, we're better. And they would expect my reaction because, sometimes I control our Instagram too.
They send it to you as the founder.
They send it to the Instagram, they'll make the comments.
You should stop building your app. Our app's better.
But they expect me. I tell my team, and the way I respond to these people is, and I say, hey, I'm sorry you feel that way, and maybe your app is better. We're not trying to be better than any other app. We're just trying to help the dating app world. And it's so fascinating because when I respond that way, this person who came at me with all this vigor and hate has no other way to respond.
Softens.
And they'll respond just saying oh yeah, you're right. We're sorry. And I'm like, well, now you just made me look so good. And the other thing I think about is why would you want to shit on and take down, say, the bigger players or the other competitors? Again, assuming all things are equal, where they're not being malicious. Because what if one of my competitors, or what if one of these bigger apps is we love him so much, we love his idea so much, let's work together or buy it, right? Where if every day I spewed hate against Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, and say I was competing with them, they wouldn't want to buy me. They'd be like, no, we're just gonna try and push him down. But if I'm saying, hey, I love Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, but I'm just trying to create this little niche in the market, maybe they're like, you know what, this guy's creating something great. He's for all dating apps. We love his messaging. Let's buy his dating app. And I think if you think of life that way, it only helps you. Because if you want to take down a $1 billion company or $1 trillion company, good luck. Again, if you're going at it, if they're doing something malicious that you're trying to call them out on, that's one thing. But if you're just trying to take them down, just to take them down, you don't have the legal team, the manpower. They're just going to squash you like a bug. So why not approach them with love? So that's my mentality. Not for everybody, but
Love is the limitless thing.
Yeah.
Love is the thing that could actually create the ultimate, leveling out of those power imbalances and structures. Obviously, that's something I believe in significantly. But what about this balance? I think people really struggle with the paradox of the idea of being completely yourself, saying what you believe in, being real and true and honest, and also being open. I think a lot of people struggle to put these two things together. They think you're either outspoken and bold and you have no time for anyone else's opinion and you shouldn't have time for anyone else's opinion, or you're kind of open to everything and you're a bit sort of ungrounded and not really like have conviction in yourself.
Yeah. So I think that's such a great question. So my brother is a firefighter in New York, and he knows the Declaration of Independence and every single law in America to a T, right? And he's a very much a constitutionalist, right? He's the Constitution is the Constitution, but he's the way he is, right? He believes what he believes. But if you sat here and you said, I know that you are the way you are, but I disagree with this aspect of the Constitution, he wouldn't say, oh, you're wrong, I'm right. And he wouldn't be the opposite. And just saying, he wouldn't be the opposite, saying, oh yeah, whatever you say is right because I'm open to anything. He would say, this is what I believe in, but I'm open to any discussion, and I would love to hear why you don't believe this way, and then I would love to have a healthy debate with you about it. And I think that's essentially being true to yourself, but also leaving room open for room for improvement, right? Because yeah, maybe he is so stuck in what he believes, but there's so many times where I would sit down with him or someone else would sit down with him and say, well, have you thought about it this way? Or what about this scenario? And he'll be like, okay, that makes sense. And it goes against what he believes in, but it's him evolving and having that small percentage of growth. So he's an extreme example, but I think if you could be true to yourself and if you could put yourself essentially first, that's good sometimes. But I think being open to knowing that you don't know it all and being open to other people's viewpoints and opinions that could help you is so important because that's essentially when you're going to be the best you. The more you know about other people and the more you learn, that's when you're going to be at your ultimate peak.
Couldn't agree more. It's really a brave new world that we're living in. I think that is going to continue at exponential speed. What do you see as the future of relationships and the future of entrepreneurship? Let's maybe speak specifically about relationships first. Like, do you feel that these ideals and kind of traditions of how a relationship has looked, obviously you and Hannah have just gotten married, congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you feel like this is something that will continue to live on in its power and meaning as we evolve forward? I have this debate with people.
I would say, in full honesty, relationships and love in the near future will probably be chaotic and continue to have a lot of twists and turns. And I think through social media and through technology, until we could kind of hone in on that more and figure out how we could coexist with that, I think it's going to be challenging for people to be in relationships. So in the long run, I hope, like everything else we're seeing, there's a correction and people see, okay, we were really extreme with this, but it's not sustainable for forever. So let's try and coexist and work with it. And I think we're seeing that in the world with other things, but with dating, I just think that, again, we have so much access to so many options, and we don't allow ourselves the room to grow with another human being. And I think that's because our attention spans are so short. Yes. We're so stubborn. We see how we should be portrayed through social media.
Yeah.
That
how we want to be seen.
We run away from challenges. And I think
that's so true.
If you're a person that runs away from challenges, which I think is the way the world's trending right now, that's not a good recipe for a relationship, because a relationship is full of challenges and it's full of people strong enough to get through individual challenges together without letting that short-term distress detract a strong, powerful, bigger picture of love.
I think that that's such an important message, that facing the fact that there's going to be hard conversations, there's going to be uncomfortable times, there's going to be times where you're not aligned, your paths are maybe pointed in different directions. And the tendency, because we're not practiced at looking for the solution, being vulnerable, open, honest human beings, because of kind of the societal context that we're living in right now, it can be so easy to just see that as a reason to walk away, rather than opening that conversation and saying, hey, okay, this is the reality of our situation right now. How can we figure it out?
Yeah.
And figuring it out together. And I think how important is that in teams as well? As you're growing and building a team, how many reactive leaders don't really give the opportunity for a problem to be solved through the practicing of kind of what you're speaking to.
Yeah, and I think if you looked at your relationship or partnership as a team, you would look at every single situation that you go through with your partner differently. Because say you and I are on a team with the business. If we have an issue, I'm not going to be like, well, you're wrong, Nicole. And you're going to say, well, you're wrong, Joe. And then it's one of us has to be wrong, one of us has to be right. And there's a winner and a loser. And I think that's terrible. But if we're on the same team, it's like, okay, Nicole, why do you feel this way? This is how I feel.
Your success is my success.
This is how I feel. Our end goal is to obviously make this outcome successful. What do I have to change? What do you have to change for us to kind of agree on this situation? And I think if we saw our partners that same way, where it's like, okay, you did something I didn't like, but maybe you're not wrong, maybe I'm not right. Why did you do that? Let me explain why I didn't like that. And let's work together to figure out why it happened and how going forward it won't happen again or be less frequent. And I think if we see ourselves as a team and see ourselves as not being against our partner to be right or wrong, that's a very powerful thing in our relationship. And being a CEO or a founder or working on a team.
Completely. We call it at Love Out Loud the development of emotional capacity. The capacity to approach situations like that, even when you're triggered, even when it's difficult. And that really is the path to expansion, the path to becoming a bigger human and growing on the journey. And I really, really think that message needs to be said in so many different ways right now. As we go through rapid evolution as a world, the most important thing is for us to actually come together in solidarity as humanity, not just in our relationships, but more broadly, because we're going to have serious challenges we need to overcome. And if we can't get, these kind of smaller situations right, how are we ever meant to create a unified world? I interviewed my 100-year-old grandma. She's about to turn 101 next week.
Congratulations, grandma.
To her,
wow.
Yeah, she's amazing. On what the world was like when she was living through the wars as a child in London, and her view on our generation. And I'm actually going to write this up and hopefully make it the forward in my book, because I was so touched by this, what she had to say. And essentially what she was saying was, I asked her, like, do you think our generation or the world right now, humanity right now, has hope and what it takes to create a unified world? And she said, no. And I said, do you think that was possible when you were my age or younger than me? And she said, yes. And I said, well, what's the difference? And this is someone that had lived through war, so to be more hopeful at that time in her life with all of the wisdom that she's accumulated in her life today. She said, because everyone now just expects so much and wants so much more that no one's going to be willing to compromise. No one's going to be willing to give up what they have, for the betterment of the whole.
Yeah.
And until we resolve that, we really cannot find unity. And I was really impacted by that perspective coming from her in particular. I guess her looking at a world and just thinking everything is so available and everyone expects something for nothing. And coming from where she's come from, how much of a stark contrast that must be. I'm sure every generation said this, but isn't that older generation that we live with so fascinating? I feel like I heard this last week where someone said the big problem with the world right now is that we don't listen to our elders. Oh, so true.
Right? Because the elders have lived through the world, have lived through experience, are the reason that we are progressing. And it's a gap it's a bridge between what happened then and what's happening now. And only they could speak to it better than anybody else. So I think that's part of the problem with, like you said, all this access to technology, and we want so much. So you have a 25-year-old kid who gets all this information and he thinks that that's true, when 100 years ago, the only way that your grandmother and other people in her era got their facts information was through the elders, or they read the books that the elders had wrote. And I think that's beautiful, is learning from the elders and figuring out what they did right and what they did wrong, and then making it better. Now, we don't pay attention to our elders at all. We think that they're outdated. And we think that we're so smart. And it's especially true. Like, I talk to a lot of people who come from like communist countries, right? And, they're older as well. So they've been through some crazy shit, like your grandmother. And they say, it's so fascinating to me that a lot of people in America hate America. And I grew up in this communist country and I did everything I can to come here. And don't get me wrong, like, America has a lot of room for growth and has a lot of issues, but it's just...
Do people understand the alternative?
Again, it's just people kind of, again, saying we want everything right now. And then like you see what goes on in like Russia and Ukraine, and it's like, yeah, the world has to move forward together, but let's learn from the past and let's do it together. Let's be a free world, but let's also help the whole other world to all become free together. And I think if that messaging is more unifying and it's learning from people like your grandmother, it's a beautiful thing, but we don't do that.
Yeah. So it's so important. This has been a really, I think, important and great and brilliant conversation. What are you left with in terms of your takeaways, the encapsulation of the conversation, the final message, maybe to someone listening who wants more connection?
Yeah, I would say speaking about my love life, speaking about being an entrepreneur, how I met you, they all stem from the same exact thing. And that is to put yourself out there, right? Whether you want to start a company, put yourself out there knowing there's a strong percent chance this might not work, but I'm okay with that. If you want to fall in love, go on a date, understand that there's a strong percent chance this date you go on will not be your future wife or husband, but just do it. And say hello to every single person. 90% of the people you say hello to, it's just going to be a hello, but 10% could be the 10% that change your life and become friends and become colleagues. And I think, again, I can only speak from my experience. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I put myself out there, and thankfully, I'm very lucky it's working. I was always open to rejection and dating, and I kept putting myself out there, and I'm married. And every person that I come across, if there's an opportunity to be genuine and just say hello, the way I did it with you at Soho House, you never know what could happen, because now I feel like we have a lifelong friendship. We're aligned. We're on this mission of changing the world together. And it just all simply started with putting yourself out there, not caring if you're judged, not caring if you're rejected, being comfortable with who you are to put yourself into a vulnerable position.
I love it. Love yourself enough to give that to yourself. Joe, it's always a pleasure. How can our community support you and First Rounds on Me?
Yeah. So if you're single and you're trying to just connect with other people, I think we're trying to build our user base still. So people who listen to Nicole are the kind of people that we want on the app. So please try it. Let us know what you think. And then if you are in a relationship, just spread the word to the people that you align with. And if you want to support me, just be nice to each other. And if you want to follow me, I send some pretty nice messaging on my Instagram. It's First Rounds on Joe. And that's really it. And I appreciate you, Nicole. It's like you said, it's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too. And all of those links will be in the footnotes, so check it out. Thank you for listening, my friend. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know by leaving a review or sharing the episode with someone you love and expanding this conversation as far and wide as possible. If you're looking for a community to have conversations with about global affairs, please jump in our Telegram group or join our free think tanks. Thanks for being a part of the shift towards a love-based civilization. We'll see you in the Telegram group or in the next episode.